Joan Walsh, welcome to the sanctuary.
Thank you. Thank you so much. It's great to see all of you here tonight. I am blessed to have many home bases. I grew up on Long Island. My family moved to Wisconsin, and I went to high school and college there, and I wound up in San Francisco more than half my life ago. But Albany is actually a home base for me, too. My father's closest brother lived here with his family, and we spent every summer spending some time in Albany. So it was that glorious place where you spend your summer as a child. So feel lucky, people. You live in Valhalla. And I have some wonderful family and friends who are here tonight, so I'm very excited to be here. So I wrote this book, What's the Matter with White People? Why We Long for a Golden Age That Never Was. And people usually drop the subtitle, although it's important. And my friend Chris Matthews always laughs when he says the title. He thinks it's hilarious, but he never really gets to the bottom of what's so funny about it. But that's okay, because at least he mentions it. But, you know, in this crazy election season, I feel like, honestly, for the most part, I've only gotten to one of the multiple meanings of the title, and that's the kind of obvious one. What's the matter with white people that 90% of self-identified Republicans are white in a country that's 62% white, and the white population is dwindling? This has to be disturbing to Americans, to Democrats, and to Republicans, because it puts the party on a demographic extinction course, but it also threatens in the meantime, clapping for that, okay. We've had new parties emerge before, maybe that'll happen. But for the time being, they run the country more than half the time, if you look back over my lifetime, and it's rather dangerous. We're not talking about a country club that's all white, or a new fancy restaurant. Or a gated community. It's one of the two parties that runs our country. And I think as we become a multiracial society, this is terrible, Politics shouldn't be so starkly racialized. Race shouldn't be politicized in this particular way. And so I set out to write a book that would try to understand and explain that. And only you can tell me if I succeeded. But the first thing that I wanted to get at with the subtitle about the longing for a golden age. My friend, Joe Biden, he would call me his friend, was joking today that, we turn our clocks back tonight, and it's Mitt Romney's favorite time of year, because he gets to turn the clock back like he's been trying to, and like he will if he wins on Tuesday. This is his big night. And I think that the book came out the week of the Republican convention in Tampa, and I think what we saw was this really palpable nostalgia for a time in the past that had gone away or that had been destroyed by Democrats. So I just want to spend a couple moments talking about what that time was and what was golden about it, because I think if we don't acknowledge that it was golden for some people, and that's very important, the some people part, we don't see what's at stake for them, and we don't see what they feel that they've lost. The golden age stretched through my childhood. I feel like I was one of the last people to whom the American dream, the American promise was really kept. I went to great public schools. I went to a great public university, the University of Wisconsin. I paid, I think, $350 a semester when I graduated in 1980. It was really something that a family of modest means could expect to do if you did well enough, and you didn't even have to do that well. I didn't do that well. And I think when we look back at this golden age, we know that it was mainly a golden age for white people. And I think that a lot of the people who enjoyed the golden age don't really, still to this day, understand the extent to which government created the opportunities that let them rise and let their families rise. My working class Irish Catholic family, on my father's side, they really rose in one generation. They rose out of poverty, not merely working class status, but really severe poverty. where kids were sent away for a time to live with relatives, and the family didn't always hold together, and finally did again. But the government played a role. We made decisions as American people in the period after the Great Depression and after World War II that we were going to flatten income inequality, and that a strong middle class was our bulwark against fascism or communism. And so we decided that the incomes of the rich were going to grow a little bit more slowly, and the incomes of the poor and the middle were going to grow faster. We had much more progressive taxation. Starting with the New Deal, we made it much easier for workers to unionize. Social Security played a role in helping to create the middle class, because I know we think of it as this greedy geezer program. I don't. I'm getting there. But you know, it's actually, if we didn't have Social Security, it would make life hard for a lot of younger people who would then be the sole support of their parents when they couldn't work anymore. We had the GI Bill, which made it possible for returning soldiers to buy homes and go to college, but it wasn't just the GI Bill. We were building universities at an amazing clip. Before the war, only 1 in 3 college-age students went to college. By 1970, excuse me, I did that backwards. 1 in 8 went to college before the war. By 1970, it was 1 in 3. An amazing expansion of opportunity. At the same time, we were guaranteeing the mortgages of people who couldn't previously get mortgages. We were building those roads out to those lovely suburbs where we had our homes, our American dream homes with the white picket fences. And I think that this was a golden age for a lot of people, but it left out women in some ways, and it absolutely left out African Americans. All of these programs that I talked about either actually discriminated or they didn't prevent discrimination. This great expansion of wealth that people were able to have through home ownership did not happen for African Americans and to some extent Latinos. The wonderful suburbs where we went off, driving on our government-built roads, sometimes had restricted covenants. We had redlining so that people left behind in the cities by the white people could no longer get money to buy their homes or repair their homes. And so we had really, as many of us said in the 60s, we really had two societies. And there's a troubling gap here, a communication gap, if you will, where people, white people, let's just say it, really don't understand the extent to which they had help. You know, the controversy over the summer when the president gave a speech, it was the Elizabeth Warren speech saying we're all in it together and rich people had help, and the president truncated his message by saying, hello, business owner, you didn't build that. We know what he meant, and they tried to make a big deal out of it. I was in Tampa. It was very sad. This was a big moment for them in Tampa. But the truth is, we know that what he's saying is true. Of course we built our businesses, and of course we worked hard. But we got a lot of help that people don't acknowledge as help. And then African Americans and Latinos point to that help and say, well, hey, we didn't get it. It's time, it's time to make things right. And you've got people looking and saying, how can you be complaining about not getting help that I don't even think that I got? And we're in a lot of trouble over that gulf. So that's something that I wanted to address with the book. I also wanted to address our misconceptions and our again, parallel narratives about what happened when we did start to address that inequality. The 60s were, for many of us, wonderful, and we did great things. The civil rights movement was the greatest movement of my lifetime, and the women's movement was amazing. We stopped an unjust war, and that was, again, the right thing. But there was a lot to be afraid of in the 60s, and Republicans were excellent at stoking that fear. You know, I don't think I realized until I worked on the book that Lyndon Johnson signs the Voting Rights Act in early August of 1965, and less than a week later, the neighborhood of Watts in Los Angeles goes up in flames. And it was the beginning of the conservative backlash because the conservative police chief blamed the violence on liberals telling black people how hard they had it, not on actual racism or how hard people had it. But you began to have a sense that government has gone too fast, and government is rewarding people who maybe don't deserve it. Government is somehow causing this bad behavior. And you enter a period where Democrats are sort of stuck holding the bag. They're blamed for the increase in crime, for the violent fringe. It was only a fringe, but it was a pretty scary, awful fringe of the anti-war movement, for a sense that families aren't as stable, the divorce rates. 65 is an amazing year. I think about writing a book about 1965 because so much happened that year. You really do see crime go up, divorce go up, single motherhood go up. Regardless of your feelings about divorce and single motherhood, it's a sign of a change that isn't necessarily good for every family, and it's a sign that many people took it as a sign that we were moving too fast. And what you had were very, very savvy political theorists like Pat Buchanan, who recognized that the Democratic coalition was ready to come apart, and he was going to help it. And he did amazing things. The Republican Party owes Pat Buchanan a lot. He had this really famous memo in 1971 called "Dividing the Democrats," and it's brilliant. And really, what the premise is: first of all, Nixon, don't even worry about your own policies. Don't think about what's going to unite Republicans. That doesn't matter. What matters is dividing the Democrats. And you've got to convince black Democrats that the party has not done enough for them. And you've got to convince white working class Democrats that the party has done too much for blacks. And it worked because each side was starting to suspect maybe that was true. But it wouldn't have worked without a lot of help. And so we had dirty tricks, and we had all sorts of horrible things done by the Republican Party to actually foster that narrative and foment that tension. And, you know, I saw it in my own family, my working class Irish Catholic relatives. The cops and the firefighters and the steam fitters were very afraid of the change. It wasn't just race, but they were afraid of the crime, and they were afraid of the disorder, and they had a real keen sense of college kids. They really hated the college kids who were ingrates and didn't appreciate what they had, and were acting up and needed a slap in the face, and they were being coddled by liberal parents. And it kind of came to a head for the Democratic Party, and to some extent in my family, in the hard hat riots of 1970. I write about it in the book, but in May of 1970, after the Kent State killings, where 4 anti-war students were killed by the National Guard, after that, Mayor Lindsay of New York had the flags lowered to half staff at City Hall and called together, I don't know if he called it, people gathered. A few hundred people gathered peacefully to protest the killings. And after a little while, from the World Trade Center construction site, ironically or weirdly, about 200 hard hats came charging towards Wall Street, charging towards this incredibly poignant gathering of businessmen. My father was there. My father had gone on his lunch hour because he was so horrified by the killings. Lots of students, a decent amount of business folk too. And the hard hats weren't having it, and they came and they used their hard hats to beat the hell out of the protesters, particularly students. And my father thought he saw his steam fitter brother, who was working on the World Trade Center, at the hard hat riot. And so for me, it came to represent a schism at the heart of my family. We stopped talking politics. We stopped seeing each other quite as much, to be honest with you. The conservative side of my family sort of went in their direction, and the liberal side of my family wound up spending more time together. I don't think that was intentional. It's just what happened. And I really decided with this book to try to have a little bit more compassion for the fear that they felt as they saw the world coming apart too quickly, and as they blamed, wrongly, as they blamed protesters, and particularly minorities who were suddenly getting something for nothing when they never had any help, which of course they did, but no one was doing a good job reminding them of that. And so that's where we still are, really, but that is what got us to Reagan Democrats and the real collapse of the New Deal coalition, which we still haven't found anything entirely to replace it, but I'll talk about where I think we're going. So, okay, that's the most common understanding of the title, What's the Matter with White People? But the second meaning came to me last year when I was reviewing a book by Charles Murray. I don't know if many of you know who Charles Murray is, but I don't even know if he hung out his shingle, exactly what his shingle would say. He purports to be a sort of sociologist. People challenge his data, and they challenge it successfully. But he's the kind of conservative public intellectual that 3 decades of right-wing funding and agitation and funding of think tanks and universities has created. And a year ago, he came out with a book called Coming Apart, The State of White America, 1960 to 2010. And it was really remarkable because Charles Murray, let me backtrack one step. Charles Murray in the 80s provided the intellectual foundation for Reaganism, and particularly the notion that we fought a war on poverty and poverty won. Charles Murray wrote a book called Losing Ground, in which he argued that poverty programs had made poverty worse by allowing the poor, and he particularly focused on the African American poor, to forego marriage, not work as hard, have lots of children out of wedlock, because they could rely on the dole. And this book, I think, played a role in creating even the Democratic support for welfare reform that came to fruition in 1996. Even though I knew a lot of great liberal scholars who refuted his data and showed ways that it was wrong, it was one of those things that's too good not to be true, you know? Too good to fact check. And so it really carried the day. Well, interestingly, Charles Murray, in his new book, is making the argument that the white working class and what he calls the white lower class, the folks that are falling out of the working class, falling out of the middle class, this is happening not because our economy has changed or jobs have gone overseas or wages have declined, especially for working class men. No, it's happened because they aren't getting married, they're shacking up, they're having kids out of wedlock, and they're not working as hard. And I realized that he was saying the exact same thing about white working class people that he'd said about African Americans 25 years earlier. And this wasn't the only thing that I saw. I was really struck in 2011, after 2010, when there was the backlash that I would argue, you know, the economy didn't heal fast enough, and there were things the president could have done. There were more things he could have done. He couldn't have done everything alone. But anyway, there was a lot of voter anger. There was a backlash. And in places like Ohio and Wisconsin, you elected really right-wing governors. And they immediately turned on public workers. And I know, because I've spoken to them, a lot of public workers voted for Scott Walker and John Kasich. They were like, let's get tough on those moochers and the cheaters and the people getting something for nothing. And lo and behold, the moochers and the cheaters turned out to be public workers. So that they voted in these guys who were really determined to include them with the welfare queens and the people that we can't afford to support anymore. And it was a rude awakening. And I felt that I heard a lot of this rhetoric during the Republican primary. You know, Paul Ryan liked to talk about the makers and the takers. And Rick Santorum said, you know, the problem of poverty was all about family disintegration. And he repeatedly hailed Charles Murray on the stump. And I thought, you know, white people, the core of the Democratic Party, white working class people, they're saying the same thing about you that they've been saying about African Americans. Can you wake up and can you hear this? And the jury's still out. This was certainly, all of this is the intellectual foundation for Mitt Romney quietly talking about those slackers and moochers, the 47%, holding half our country in contempt, the people he says just refuse to take responsibility and care for their lives. it's part of the same analysis of what's wrong with our economy and what's wrong with our society, that people aren't working hard and they don't care and they don't take care of one another, which we know is an absolute lie. So that brings us to 2012 and to the present and to whether, to the third, let me pause. I never know when to drink, so. Well, I know that. That's later, we'll drink. But, you know, the third meaning of the title, What's the Matter with White People, is kind of, you know, like a New Jersey or a Long Island accent. It's like, what's the matter with white people? You know, aren't we going to be part of multiracial America? And aren't we good enough to be part of particularly the liberal Obama coalition? Because I found myself feeling, I had gotten a lot of debates with people both in 2008 and again in 2010 as people critiqued the president for not sort of being populist enough or for bending over a little bit too much for the banks, even though they don't agree. That it was really a mistake to write off the white working class as exclusively racist, or to say that the reservations of people, of white people or Latino people or Asian people about the president were all about race. During the 2008 primary, I thought that the Democrats had a new capacity to appeal to the white working class, and initially it really showed up in Hillary Clinton's totals. Which were very interesting. Hillary Clinton, in all of the primaries, tended to be the candidate of the lower income, of women, of Latinos, and of the proverbial white working class. When candidate Obama, attracted a different coalition: African Americans, some Latinos, higher income people, and college-educated whites. And I thought, you know, the party's not going to work unless those pieces of the puzzle come together a little bit better. And I didn't know why, without evidence, we would consign Hillary Clinton's supporters, white working class supporters, or women who were just thrilling to the possibility of our first woman president, why we would consign them to the category of racist and people who were implacably opposed to having a black president. And I was really pleasantly, I don't know about surprised, but Barack Obama got a higher share of the white vote and the white working class vote than white Democrats, John Kerry or Al Gore or Bill Clinton in his first term. So, you know, I thought that there was an opportunity for us to maybe begin to talk about this stuff kind of differently. And I think I have to admit that I come from a place, literally, Joe Biden, literally, I think I'm using that right, in California, where, you know, my East Coast black and white civil rights ideas didn't necessarily always fit in a context where Asians and Latinos are the fastest growing minority groups by far, racial groups by far, and in some places Asians are the dominant group. I mean, in San Francisco, the largest single group of school children are Chinese alone, and then add in other Asian subgroups, it's way more than 50%. The University of Wisconsin, California, Wisconsin, I went to Wisconsin. You know, the two flagship schools, UCLA and UC Berkeley, are now minority Asian. San Francisco's best high school, you have to take a test to get in, is more than 75% Asian. And so I think that to continue to talk about race as though there's never a situation in which any white person could be at a disadvantage versus any person of color. As I say that, that's obviously ridiculous, right? But I think that sometimes our rhetoric makes that sound possible. And I think we need to work on a more inclusive rhetoric around politics. I think that we were the people who, for good reason, spent a lot of time in the 70s and the 80s and some of the 90s talking about difference and really exploring different kinds of disadvantage. And we ceded the ground of unity and, e pluribus unum to the right. We let Ronald Reagan be the tribune of a United States of America when that impulse had mostly come from the left traditionally. And so I think we lost some years that we need to work better and work faster and gain some ground. And so that brings me to 2012. And obviously, this campaign has been really depressing in terms of racialized rhetoric, not just the campaign, the president's whole term. But what we really started to see in the summer, it's both a problem and an opportunity. Mitt Romney was having a hard time racking up his white vote totals. He needs to get like 62% of whites, and he needs to do even better than that with white working class people. And he wasn't doing it. He was not closing the deal. This is the group where the Bain Capital storyline hurt Romney more. And he started really, I hate the phrase doubling down, but there's nothing better right now. Doubling down on racial appeals. He brought us an ad that falsely accused the president of gutting the work requirement for welfare. A, it didn't happen, it was a lie. B, that welfare program was slashed and is now 0.07% of federal spending. It's not something that anybody needs to worry about except to make it bigger and to help the people who have been hurt by the cuts. That's not what he was talking about. He was trying to scare white voters into thinking that black president, once again, is going to be giving away something for nothing. I think that what's encouraging to me, though, as I watch TV when I'm not on TV, pretty much 24/7, my poor cousins, the president's firewall is right now looks like Ohio, Wisconsin, and Iowa. And a year ago, his team was talking about how do we win without Ohio, Wisconsin, and Iowa, because specifically the white working class was perceived as being so hostile to him that he would have no way to put his 2008 coalition back together. And it turns out in those 3 states, he's doing much better with white working class voters than he's doing in other places. He's roughly tied. He has an edge with white working class women, which I think is really important. And assuming he wins those 3 states, he will win the presidency. I'm not saying other groups don't matter. Obviously, in other states, it's other groups that are bringing him to victory. But they've turned out to be an important part of the coalition that he would not be president without. I think we can take a few things away from that. It's obviously the auto rescue, I don't want to call it a bailout, restructuring. It's also that this president has actually done more than any other president, although it's not widely known, to crack down on trade imbalances and bad trade behavior by China. And workers in those states actually know it. We may not know it. I didn't know it. You may know it. I shouldn't generalize. But as I looked at this, again, I thought, politics is such a game of perception. Everybody's been talking in the last 2 weeks. Well, Karl Rove in 2000 decided that he was going to pretend to be ahead with George Bush, and he was going to pretend that they were riding a wave. And we're seeing it now. Mitt Romney is pretending that he's got a shot in Minnesota and Pennsylvania. They all, and the Obama, the campaign is probably doing some of the same in other states where they may not win. It's a game of perception. It's a game of momentum. So I'm wondering, as Democrats, why would we think it was a good idea to just routinely refer to the president as overwhelmingly losing the white vote? I mean, why do we stereotype? Why do we generalize? The president has a terrible problem with older, white, Southern, evangelical, Protestant, non-college educated men. I don't want to stereotype anyone. If any of you are here tonight, I have an open mind, I know, but if you look at the numbers, they're pretty clear. The president's doing well with white working class women. The president's doing well with white single women, with white college educated women. He's doing better, again, like I said, in some places, he's doing better with those non-college educated working class men. In Ohio, he's doing better with the non-college educated white working class men than with the college educated white men. And that, usually that's flipped in most other states. So it just occurs to me that we have a great opportunity this year, and we're going to have a lot of evidence for one way or the other. Tuesday night, I hope, Wednesday morning at latest. Hope not Thursday. Hope not December. But we're going to have more demographic evidence about who's right here. But from what I can see right now, I see a lot of evidence that the president can compete with a lot of white voters, and I see a lot of evidence not to write them off and to learn how to talk about this in a way that's more inclusive and pay attention to the fact that if you really materially make their lives better, their cultural distrust or perhaps even racism subsides a little, and that we have to be smarter about talking about all of that. I really believe that that the right has given up on the idea of a United States of America and an American dream, that they're very comfortable, at least some of them for now are very comfortable with just going for the white vote. Let's try to pump it up to 65%, and not thinking about tomorrow. But I think that most Americans want to be part of a future where everybody does well. The last number I'll leave you with, and then I'll stop for questions. If you look at, in a recent survey by the National Journal of whites who admit to fearing racial change, they're not happy about the demographic browning of America, 9 out of 10 are voting for Romney. When you poll white people who say, that's fine with me, I'm good with that, 3 to 2, they're supporting the president. And so I think there are marginally more in that first category, but it's pretty split. And I think we should be fighting to reduce those numbers of people who are afraid. They'll probably be reduced by attrition over time, but I think we can convert people too by changing some of our rhetoric around difference and around what the future looks like for all of us. I think that racial change can be a plus. I've thrived living in California, being a minority, and my daughter has too. And my daughter's generation is so much more comfortable and fluent with all this. I think that that people who care about these issues really can make a difference in making this a less divisive country politically. Neighbor to neighbor, I'm not talking about what's going on in Washington. That's going to be really ugly for a while. But I think in the way we talk to one another and we talk about one another, I think we can help this. We can heal some of these wounds. So with that, I'd love to take questions because you look like a rip-roaring smart audience who's going to want to talk. And we'd like people, if you can, to come up and use the microphone, because this is being streamed and recorded. And
Hi.
Hi.
My name is John Amadon. I live in Albany. I'm wondering why issues that I find to be terribly important aren't even mentioned, like the environment, fracking in New York State,
yes,
the need for clean water, mountaintop leveling in West Virginia, and then there are the nuclear issues, waste all over the country, nuclear weapons, which are still threatening in the world. Even if fear isn't at a great level, the threat is still very much there.
sure.
The wars that are exhausting our economy, and then healthcare too, which is another major drag on the economy. And while all of what you said is very interesting, it doesn't touch the issues that I am greatly concerned about, and the campaign isn't.
Well, the campaign and the White House, after the campaign, after election, made a decision to downplay climate change, to downplay the divisive issues. They're very afraid of coming out against coal. They've done some good things, but they've done some bad things. And they really believed that they could not afford to alienate, again, some of this, this sort of swing state firewall for him. Some of these people vote around the issue of coal in particular, and it's been very disappointing to many of us. I think that Hurricane Sandy made a mockery of this election season in which climate change was not mentioned by either candidate. But I also think, because I'm an optimist, that it's going to open the door to more agitation and more attention. The wars, I'm a civil libertarian, and I would say that I've had some problems with the president on national security, and I think he could have. I was sorry that he sent more troops into Afghanistan. Glad he brought the troops home from Iraq. He did do that. It'll be very hard for Mitt Romney to send them back when John Bolton thinks that's a good idea. And, you know, he's drawing down in Afghanistan steadily. I know several people who, thank God, have come home. But, you know, it's honestly not fast enough. And I think it's still too reliant on this notion that we can terrorize the terrorists out of attacking us rather than build a more just Middle East where people can live together. So I understand your frustration. Hi.
How you doing? Bob from Syracuse.
Hi, Bob.
How you doing? The general question that I would have is, do you think it was during the 60s, or was it after World War II, where all of a sudden you stop seeing the decline of the European communities, where, because like growing up, I grew up here in Troy,
Yeah.
so we would always be at the Ancient Order of Hibernians. And for some reason, it seems like for some reason we've forgotten, we all of a sudden we became white
Right.
Americans rather than, well, he was Irish American, or he's German American, he's English American, French American. And for some reason that seems confusing, that we
Right.
seem to forget the prejudice that we've had in the white community.
Right.
You know, you can sit there and say that, but I got books of old time Troy and Albany, and you see the signs, Irish need not apply.
Right. No, I write. I hope you get to read the book, because I write a lot about how, you know, there will never be anything in this country to compare to slavery, and when we get into comparisons, we risk being stupid. But you have to say that the conditions for Irish Catholic immigrants were arguably the worst in the country, and that Irish Catholics faced a kind of brutality and prejudice that was violent as well as no Irish need apply, and that pit the Irish Catholics against African Americans in very specific ways. You know, some abolitionists, wonderful as they were on slavery, were very fervent nativists who took up the cause of black people while also taking up the cause of driving Irish Catholics out. I remember going to the Tennant Museum in New York, which is an awesome experience, and being told that the list of sort of preferred tenants, blacks were way above the Irish, and the Irish were absolutely the lowest. You only rented to them under dire circumstances because they were dirty, they drank a lot, they fought, they were rowdy, they were lazy, they were drunks. You know, I talk in the book about how every stereotype that we've wielded against African Americans was once wielded against the Irish, and that, you know, maybe it was too close for comfort. So I also think that, you know, when part of the discomfort with racial change for a lot of white people is that they don't think of themselves as white. And now I know that is a kind of white privilege, because being white is just being American. And so, wait, don't make me think about myself as white. On the other hand, and you know, if you talk to Latinos or African Americans or Asians, this is true for every group. We're not all one thing, far from it. But you just get this intense resistance from whites in particular, who I've got an Irish grandmother and a German grandfather, and what am I? I'm a mutt. I'm nothing. And so I think that there's really no white culture to sort of have affinity to, and so sometimes the emphasis on race just feels like a loss and being consigned to like a negative status rather than, well, let's talk more about where we all came from. So it's complicated. Hi.
Hi, I'm Graham Dean. I actually came over from Great Barrington, Massachusetts to hear you, and thank you for coming.
Where W.B. Du Bois said that the Irish had it worse than he did, that the Irish Catholics in his town had it worse than he did.
He's our hero. He's
Yeah.
my hero.
Mine too.
Well, I grew up in England, which is a very class-conscious society, and there's this myth in America of mobility, which is, as we know, is becoming less and less, and the divide is growing greater and greater. And politicians are very willing to talk about the middle class. Tonight, you're using the term working class very freely. Why are politicians so afraid to use the term working class?
Because I don't think anybody really knows what it means, and I don't know that even working class people want to be working class. It seems like everybody wants to be middle class. The working class, we're middle class. The rich, we're middle class. Okay, maybe we're upper middle class. And that this myth of a classless society is very, very central to Americans' ideas of themselves, and we pride ourselves on not having class conflict because we are so egalitarian and everyone gets along. But at a time like right now, when we see that upward mobility is harder in this country than it is in those class-conscious old countries of old Europe, as Donald Rumsfeld said, I mean, we should be ashamed. When we talk about American exceptionalism, part of it was that incredible capacity to rise. It was always overstated, but it was not entirely a myth. It's getting pretty close to being a myth right now, which is a trouble. Hi.
Hi, my name is Jill. I'm from over in Waterford, New York.
Hi, Jill.
And my question is, why do you think there is more of a racial element now with the election now, that an African-American president, we've already, quote, we've already had one,
Right.
he just wants to stay longer, than it was in '08 when we were trying to get one for the first time, but there didn't seem to be as big, they didn't seem to be pushing the racial card as hard then as they are now, and why do you think that is?
I think that's a great question, and I'm just going to try to give you some of my ideas. I don't think I can answer it. I mean, I think that at the end of the 2008 campaign, you began to see, as they began to realize they were going to lose, they became more desperate. And the campaign, especially Sarah Palin's campaign, Sarah Palin's October 2008 events were really proto-Tea Party rallies, where the president was denounced as a terrorist, a socialist, where people would carry little Curious George dolls with a label Obama, where the race baiting became really, really obvious. And to his credit, John McCain had told his staff that he did not want to go there. And I think that when the president won, you know, I'm sure obviously some racist people voted for him too. I think there was a lot of desperation around the economy, but I also think, I truly believe, because I've talked to some of these people, that some of the Tea Party madness was people who lived such isolated lives racially that they never dreamed that this country could elect a black president. Okay, the Democrats, they're out there, they're doing something crazy again, now they put up a black guy, but you know, he's not gonna win. And then he won. You know, and so I think that it did catalyze a profound backlash, and you know, you could argue that it's good because it brought some people out from under their rocks, but at the same time, as I said, you know, higher percentage of white voters did vote for the president than earlier Democrats. We have to build on that. We have to hold on to the signs that are positive and that give us optimism, and then figure out how to fight the ugliness. I still think, again, I'm an optimist. The ugliness is marginal. There's more of it than we would like, but it's marginal. It's angry, crazy people, and there are way, way, way more of us than there are of them. So, hi.
So I'd like to thank you for coming.
My pleasure.
My name is Eddie. I'm a political science student from the University of Albany, community organizer around here, LGBT activist, organizer of Get Equal, that pushed Obama to get Don't Ask Hotel repealed.
Great.
My question is, minus the 40 women 40 rule and the double 75, do you think this coming new election we will face a realignment? And with that realignment, can the LGBT vote become the focal point and become the new juggernaut in the electorate? With that said, is it possible for the LGBT community win everything between 2013 and 2014, which is I'm trying to organize a giant march in DC?
Great.
Thank you.
I think that success breeds success, and a lot of things have happened with LGBT organizing. It's been really powerful. I know a lot of women have said over the last couple years, we really need to take a page from LGBT organizers. They've had a lot of success. I think it's becoming. You saw that the president had to. I believe he always supported gay marriage. I mean, come on, he didn't believe in gay marriage? That's ridiculous. But I think he saw that it was a political win for him, and I think he saw that he had to do it. And so the votes of gay people and the votes of people who love gay people who aren't gay became important to him. He saw real political benefit in doing something courageous, and he knew that it would lose him some votes on the other side, or even within our own coalition, when you have ministers who are not happy about it, although the numbers have been small. I also want to say the president's leadership on that issue, organizing has been crucial. Organizing is the big story, but the president's leadership has also been crucial. And attitudes in Maryland after he came out, that LGBT people are doing much better with organizing because the president came out and came down on the side of justice. Leaders need to lead, and it was a great moment to see him do that, and also to see public opinion change, because he changed it, and it was like a mainstream thing to be pro-marriage equality. So it's happening. Hi.
Hi, my name is Ellie. When you mentioned this guy, Charles Murray, I don't know who he is, and his belief system, it made me think of Francis Fox Piven, if you want to comment on that. I mean, Francis Fox Piven has written a lot about welfare reform.
Right.
And the poor. And this year, Francis Fox Piven was in the news. I don't know, it was Bill O'Reilly.
It was Glenn Beck.
She was having death threats against her because of her belief in welfare reform. It was just this year.
Right.
And I think that you're mentioning, and I think and you can comment about the whole concept of the myth of the welfare queen and welfare reform at this point is it's almost a commonplace belief that welfare is really what this guy Charles Murray says, that it really is, people who don't want to work, who sloth, who are just lazy. Right. And so anyway, if you want to comment on Francis Fox Piven, and her different beliefs from Charles Murray, that's all I wanted to say.
Well, I think she did a lot for the status of welfare rights, and really raised a lot of, raised the profile of welfare rights. I guess I would also say, though, although I didn't support welfare reform in the form that it ultimately came down, I think we probably missed a turn someplace in the 60s when we could have really made a demand of jobs for all, but we were satisfied with expanding welfare rights. And I don't think that people really knew the coming unemployment crisis or the coming crisis of work for people, men without a high school diploma, let alone without a college diploma. But the disappearance of jobs for men, combined with the expansion of welfare, I don't agree with Murray that it fostered poverty or expanded poverty, but I do think that Democrats would have been better served arguing for jobs programs. And there's a point in my book where Michael Harrington, the great Democratic socialist, teams up with Daniel Patrick Moynihan, who went down in history as a controversial figure. But the two of them went to President Johnson and said, we need an emergency public works jobs program for the poor African Americans, but for poor everybody. Men, the male wage for these undereducated workers, these jobs are going away, the wages are declining. I wish Johnson had listened to them, but he was escalating the war, and he actually slashed poverty funding that year. Jobs program was way too expensive at a time of war, which is another really sad missed opportunity from 1965. Hi.
Hi, my name is Laura, and I'm so thrilled that you're here.
Thank you.
And that I came to see you. I read you on Salon, and I do miss Glenn Greenwald.
I
But
do too.
yeah, he was wonderful. And I also want to say that my husband grew up in Long Island, went to school at Madison, and lived in San Francisco. So if you
How
ever
strange.
if you ever felt like you were being stalked, I apologize now. I had
Occasionally, I did.
I had
mean,
nothing to do with it. I will ream him out when I get home.
Yeah, could you? It got a little weird sometimes.
He's weird, yeah. And in fact, his name is Josh Mandel, and there's a conservative Josh Mandel.
not that
I don't
Josh
have to
Mandel.
tell you.
Oh,
he is,
my God.
He is not that Josh Mandel. But you know what? It's a little sad that it looks like he's going to lose, and then we don't have the joke anymore.
Yeah,
So-
the sooner you don't have the joke anymore, the better off the country.
I know. We will all be.
He's running. If you don't know, he's running against Sherrod Brown, who's one of our most progressive and awesome senators in Ohio. He's going to lose. He's just a little putz, but sorry.
So, I find talking to right-wingers ignorant of the facts very frustrating, but what I find even worse is these undecideds, what The Onion called the idjit vote. And I would love to hear what you think about the idjit vote and what their problem is, what's the matter with the idjits, and
That's my next book.
and I've please. And I've listened to George Lakoff, and I'm very scared of people like Frank Luntz, and why don't we have a Frank Luntz actually putting out pithy ways of promoting the truth? And I think that's why there are so many idiots in this country. Thank you.
Thank you. I actually know a couple of undecided voters, and one of them is sort of my brother-in-law, and so I hesitate to rather not call him an idjit. But, the country's very divided, and all these issues that we're talking about tonight cut in different ways for different people. And I think that undecided voters tend to feel that we haven't improved the economy enough, and we spent a boatload of money to do it or to not do it. And that seems to be their big issue. And, Republicans have scared them about debt, but Democrats scared them about debt. I remember David Axelrod, brilliant man, in the summer of 2010 said it's time to pivot to the issue of the deficit. As the stimulus was working but beginning to kind of wind down, it was not the time to pivot to the deficit. President Obama, a brilliant man, a great rhetorician, was going around saying, well, when families like yours are having to cut their budget and tighten their belts, government has to do the same thing. No, absolutely not. Government doesn't do that. We do the opposite when families are tightening their belt. And so I think that they kind of played into, they really enabled Frank Lunt's framing of the problem being the deficit and the need for entitlement reform. And, they bought into all those lovely Frank Lunt's words. And so, they've been better lately, but I still worry about it. So I don't think they're idiots. I think that the choices are clear to us, but the efficacy of voting for one or the other isn't necessarily clear if you really want to make a difference and you have different ideas, even conflicting ideas about what the biggest problem is. So I know that's not satisfying, but.
Why do you think the Democrats don't have a good message machine?
I think they try. It's a really good question. I mean, they try, but I think that these reflect genuine disagreements within the party. I mean, I think that to go back to the white working class feeling abandoned, I don't think they were abandoned for African Americans. I think they were abandoned for Wall Street. And the party really became a very pro-business party and really eased up on its own history of economic populism, really sold it out. The Democratic Leadership Council guys were like people in a witness protection program. Oh, no, I wasn't a Democrat. We don't like government. No, we don't like government either. We like government less than you. And so I think people are right to be confused, whether they're undecided voters or whoever they are. Our side sort of blurred the differences. So, hi.
Hi, my name is Dan Udell and live in Taconic, New York, about 1 hour south of here. It's such a pleasure to be here, and I never thought in my life I'd be able to ask Joan Walsh a question. So
Not that hard.
I'm honored. One of the big things that surprised me about President Obama is that he became a successful defense president. And I don't think we've had a really good, successful Democratic president since perhaps FDR.
Yeah,
Some have tried, like Lyndon Johnson, and
Right.
didn't do too well.
but
But here he grabbed it, and with no experience and just out of nowhere, he just made all the right moves. But I wonder why, after all that, he still, I mean, just the aggressive moves he's taken, and also the care with which he has taken care of our veterans.
yes.
It's just enormous, both sides of the
Right.
coin. But yet, he still hasn't seemed to reach that white, the white voter, and I would think they would be represented in that group in large measure. So that's my question.
Yeah.
Don't understand it.
Yeah, I don't understand it either. I mean, he is doing better with veterans and he's doing better with active military than earlier Democrats or than he did in 2008. So there's progress. Some of what he's doing is paying off. One of the most interesting things in researching the book, I think I had this idea that all of my family had been Kennedy Democrats and liberals, and then they left either for Richard Nixon or Ronald Reagan. But what I realized doing the book is that a lot of them left when Al Smith was defeated in 1928, the first Irish Catholic president, it was a lot longer ago than I thought. But one of the issues that pulled some of the Irish out of the New Deal coalition early was defense, and was this idea that Truman lost China and the Koreas, and then in the anti-war movement you had this strong Irish American, working class, Italian American, it was pretty broad sense of patriotism, and how dare these long-haired radicals endanger our boys who are in harm's way. And it was that kind of, Democrats really got, even though it was the right thing to do to end that war, Democrats, once again, they lost China, and then they lost Vietnam. Democrats really got blamed for that, and it's amazing. Sometimes I feel like I go easy on Obama. I may not like exactly what he's doing, but I love having that be an issue where they really can't bait him at all. They try. Mitt Romney would have us at war with Iran, but he's secured that for the Democrats for the first time in my lifetime. So you're right. It's an interesting development, and maybe it will echo in the next election and election to come. Hi.
Hi, I'm Bob Doherty. I live in Troy. I'm formerly from New York as a young man, and I was at the Hard Hat riot.
Oh, wow.
And it was a very, very frightening and police-assisted violent
Yes.
episode.
Absolutely.
There was another demonstration 3 days later, and I was there too, and I had the privilege of marching with 1199, a healthcare union here.
Yeah.
And my question is back to that issue of war. I find myself very puzzled. We were so anti-war. We knew at that time if we didn't resolve our issues as a species without war, we might annihilate ourselves. And it was so dear and meaningful to us, and somehow we've lost the focus. I know as I support the president, I always write on it and tell him to stop killing people. There's a tolerance that I've experienced, and it just seems that where did the anti-war movement go? We're all sort of silent on the issue, as if to say we want to live in peace is not American anymore. Thank
Right.
you.
I think it's a troubling question, and I think that you referred to Glenn Greenwald, my former colleague, who said many times, if a Republican president was doing the things that Barack Obama has done in the realm of national security and war and drones, many of us would be in the streets. There would be an anti-war movement, but because we're divided on this issue, and we know the disaster that would be Mitt Romney, it's hard for people to mobilize. But we may well feel really guilty down the road, or we may well feel like we have to mobilize in a second term, regardless of who's supposed to come next. I do think that, my God, in Tampa, Clint Eastwood attacks the president for not bringing the troops home from Afghanistan and gets a big hand. But there is that sentiment out there, and I think that somebody could have run from the president's, a Republican conceivably could have run from the president's left on the issue of war and peace. It'll be, depending on where we are in 2016, 2015, 2014, it'll be interesting to see if with no incumbent, there emerges a more peace-oriented Democratic challenger for the 2016 primaries. I anticipate that. Hi.
Hi, and thank you for coming.
My pleasure.
My name is Alice Brody, and I'm from Albany. And so here's a question I have for you. We tend to describe this as a battle between the Republican Party and the Democratic Party, and we particularly see this in this election. But Thomas Frank's book, What's the Matter with Kansas, he really goes into depth in explaining how the Democratic Party really abandoned working class people.
Right.
And I think of Bill Clinton's passing NAFTA, which lost multi-millions of jobs, working class, industrial jobs in this country.
Right.
And then the dismantling of Glass-Steagall Act and the alliance with the financial industry. And I think that the Democratic Party has to bear some responsibility for this and the impact it's had, so that people in whose interest it is to be part of a progressive movement have aligned themselves with the right-wing movement because they haven't been able to see
The difference
somebody
between-
speaking, a party that speaks in their basic interests.
Right. I agree with you. I do write about that in the book. I thought after the horrible 2010 midterms, one of the most fascinating little statistics that I found in CNN exit polls was in 2008, if you said that Wall Street was the primary bad guy in causing the crash of 2008, you voted for Barack Obama. In 2010, if you said Wall Street was the primary bad actor, you voted for a congressional Republican. And so how that flipped in just 2 years, we can say it's unfair, it's a misperception, but I think there was the perception that the president didn't do enough to crack down on the banks that did so much to destroy the economy, and that he helped the banks and didn't necessarily help the bank's victims, or not nearly enough. So you're right. Hi.
Hi, I'm Lynn from Guilderland. I think that the Affordable Care Act is the best thing since the invention of penicillin. And yet, the president, the administration, the Democratic Party hasn't been able or willing to sell it as a real plus. We're hearing about the GM bailout, but we're not hearing about this, I think, fantastic program that Romney and the Republicans have been able to demonize. And how did that happen?
Well, I think we're hearing about some of it. I mean, I think Romney feels like he gets to demonize it, except he pretends that he's going to keep some of its popular features, like a ban on discrimination against folks with pre-existing conditions. So some of it is popular. I think that the main way that the Affordable Care Act is playing a role is an election issue, is around the contraception mandate and the fact, and I have to admit, first of all, let me just say, I think that part of the answer to your question is they just did a horrible job of selling it from day one. They really let Congress do too much. The president empowered Republicans that were never going to cooperate, and so it dragged out into that horrible summer of the awful town halls. So there's lots of little decisions along the way that added up to the trouble that he got in. And meant that even people like me, didn't understand what it ultimately did. By the time we got closest, I always supported it. I did want a public option. I'm not going to relitigate that. But I think the one really clear-cut thing that people now know is that, wow, being a woman is no longer a pre-existing condition. And that's playing a big role in the gender gap and in his support for women. And he is definitely stressing that on the campaign trail. But I agree, you're right. There's more in it that people ought to know and don't. Hi.
Hi, I'm Ron from Saratoga.
Hi.
I'd like to start with a suggestion Maybe Chris should stop talking once in a while and let you talk a little more.
Thank you.
My real question is, it bothers me a great deal when Romney comes out and tells a bald-faced lie, but what really bothers me, a lot of the media doesn't jump back at it. Do you think that's being ignored a lot?
Oh, I do. I mean, I was really apoplectic after the third debate because I watched people all day long, even on MSNBC, which is usually better than that, talk about, Romney reversed himself on all these positions, and he sounded like Obama, and he's going to pursue peace with Iran, and he didn't mean any of those things, any of those warmongering things he said, and it was like, this is very wise of him. It's a pivot to the center. We knew that he would do this one of these days. It's like, what are you talking about? On the most pressing issues of war and peace and who lives and dies, we don't know what the man would do, and you're praising that as politically savvy and well within the bounds of reasonable politics. I mean, that's ridiculous, and that's some of what the president was up against in all the debates. That Romney could reinvent himself, could lie, and reporters just shrugged. They're cynical. Well, everybody does that. Actually, the president didn't do that. Like him or not, there weren't a whole lot of positions where he dissembled or lied or hid what he stood for. It really only went one way. So I totally agree. The media has really enabled him. If he wins, we'll be talking about the swing states and Ohio, but we should really be talking about the media, because if he wins, they let it happen. Yeah. Hi.
Hi, I'm Barbara Dean, also from Great Barrington, Massachusetts, birthplace of W.E.B. Du Bois. And my question has to do with the title, to get back to the title of your book. And I did not realize there was a subtitle. As soon as I heard the title, I just leaped for joy, because I've been asking myself that question all my life.
Aww.
So I'm really still looking for answers. And I'm wondering, I know that you talked about this now, and you must in your book, which I will definitely buy and read, about white privilege, and why it is that white people don't realize that they've had white privilege all along, all through the ages, because the white people have been the oppressors, basically, in history of non-white populations and indigenous populations, and you can look all around the world and you will see that, and that's always been a question of mine. Why? And so this whole thing of white privilege, do you think that it actually has its origins really way back?
I don't know. White people have oppressed plenty of white people over the centuries too. So I don't really think it goes one way. And every group oppresses people within its group. People with privilege oppress people without privilege. So I'm certainly would never say that there's no white privilege. It persists. It enabled a lot of horrible conditions in this country. But I just can't. I can't accept that it only goes one way, or that it's the only kind of privilege. That the class privilege is pretty intense too. Sometimes they go together, sometimes they don't. Hi.
Hello, my name is Quentin, and I'm from Hudson. And my question is, during this election cycle, why hasn't either party addressed the issue of poverty and poor people? It hasn't been discussed at all.
It's a very good question. Mitt Romney brings it up occasionally only to ding the president. And the president has, again, it doesn't make him special. This has been, you didn't hear Bill Clinton talk a lot about poor people. Honestly, in 2008, I'm embarrassed, I supported John Edwards at first, because John Edwards was the one talking about poverty and talking about the two Americas. And I think as long as we pretend that very concentrated poverty, urban or rural or ex-urban, is going to be addressed by a rising tide lifts all boats. As long as we look away from the effects of persistent racial and class discrimination and the isolation of the poor, and think, well, as long as the jobless rate keeps going down, we'll reach those people too. It's a much more complicated job, and the other way that it comes out, which is so frustrating to me, the only poverty program we have left apparently is schools. And so you see teachers getting bashed and teachers having to be the only ones. We've cut out so many social services, and kids go to school hungry, and they go to school sick, and they go to school with family problems, and they go to school cold. But our poverty program is Race to the Top, where a teacher, by him or herself, is supposed to deal with all of these problems that concentrate in a child's life and keep them from learning. Education is hugely important to the American dream, but lots of people are locked out of the American dream by generations of poverty, and it's not going to be addressed by a terrific teacher. And so I share your frustration, and I don't know, I also think that the president is very, very conscious, maybe too conscious, of needing to be the president of all America. And obviously, poverty isn't just a black issue, but to the extent that in the minds of so many Americans it is. He's been, very race neutral in the way he talks about these things, and he's also, again, acted as though getting more people back into the middle class is going to help. And it will help, and it's important, but it won't help the desperately poor. And we, going back to what I said before about Michael Harrington and Daniel Patrick Moynihan, that was a moment where people were prepared to say, this will not get better just with jobs. In fact, the economy is making jobs worse. And it was a road not taken. I hope that changes. Hi.
Hi. There were a couple more things I wanted to bring up. I'm really distressed over the loss of habeas corpus in this country. I despise the fact that we have the National Defense Authorization Act, and any American can be disappeared,
Yes.
and that the president is fighting to retain those powers when he had lost in court once. I'm really upset about the Guantanamo Bay prison still being open and innocent people being jailed. And I'd really like to challenge you on the myth that somehow we can build a just society or in the cultures of the Middle East when we haven't done it here.
That's a good point. That's a good point. But, I think that they're related to each other, and as long as our answer to the Middle East is oppression and weapons, it's going to be harder to build a just society here, because the problems of poverty we were talking about, the president has started to say we can do nation building at home, but we can't do nation building when we're spending the kind of money we are tearing apart Middle Eastern countries. So we have now reached the end of the Q&A session, and I'm going to go sign books if people want to. Oh, I'm sorry. Well, okay. Last question.
Hi, my name is Nancy. I'm from Saratoga Springs.
Hi, Nancy.
Why do you think it is, this is a two-part question, why do you think it is that our democracy has stayed so entrenched in this two-party system when that's not the model in other parts of the world, a system that for many of us we feel, or I myself feel disenfranchised from, and feel that either the two parties on many issues, yes, there are differences between Romney and Obama, I can see that, but on many they are completely allied with each other. They completely block out third-party candidates being able to come and just debate with them.
Right.
The stage. Why do you think that is, and do you see any optimism for anything shifting?
I don't know that it's shifting anytime soon. I mean, it's partly our form of democracy that we don't let parties share seats. I mean, the way that we award votes, the way that we're divided up in Congress, it discourages it. On the other hand, we've had other parties in American history. They die out. I think that the two parties have made a lot of decisions over the last 30 years to really tighten their stranglehold on power and exclude third parties. So it's a vicious cycle. And I confess to deciding that I'm a Democrat and I work at the left wing of the possible, as Michael Harrington said, because I don't know anything more effective than that to do. And it frustrates me when progressive people shun the Democratic Party, but the Tea Party goes and takes over the Republican Party. So that's my approach, but I admit it's not everybody's.
Thank you very much for coming out, making the Sanctuary for Independent Media part of your day. Really appreciate it.